All right, let's give a warm welcome to Hitesh and Erik.
Here we go.
All right, I'd like to request a more enthusiastic room captain next year if anyone from the FinOps Foundation is listening. Just kidding, I was in B last year, and Joe is the absolute best, so. There it is. All right.
All right, well, thank you for coming right after lunch and not running off to the beach, which I'm sure that's where everyone else is, but they'll come back in. A little bit myself, I'm Hitesh. I've been at FactSet for about 2 years. I run the FinOps program there since I joined FactSet. FactSet is a global financial digital platform, enterprise solutions provider. We have over 200,000 global client customers, users, as well as 8,000 client institutions. We have more than 40 years of investment experience providing advisory, analytics, and data management services to investment professionals.
Hi, I'm Erik Carlin. I'm the co-founder and chief product officer of a company called ProsperOps. We are the leading FinOps automation platform. By that, I mean that our platform doesn't generate visibility and recommendations. Our mission is to generate savings outcomes for our customers. So if we're doing our job right, we're effectively writing our customers a check every single month in the sense that they're saving on their cloud bill. We serve hundreds of customers from startups to enterprises. We manage about $2 billion of cloud usage under management. We've returned over now $1 billion to our customers, which we're super proud of. We support AWS and Google and are actively adding support for Azure, which should be out later this year. And you know, I'm proud to say that we've been affiliated with the FinOps Foundation since the very beginning. We were one of the original vendor partners of the FinOps Foundation. We've had the privilege to just participate and watch this wonderful community grow. I personally sit on the governing board, and you know, my heart and sort of the goal of everybody in our company is really just to participate in this community and you know, try to help everyone prosper in the cloud. So whether you're a customer or not, if we can assist, please let me know. I'm on FinOps Foundation Slack, so feel free to hit me up anytime with any questions. Okay, we did draw the after lunch slot, which is kind of nappy time. So I'm going to start with some interesting data and two provocations. Two provocations, you may agree or disagree, but let's go through that together. Hopefully that you know, keeps you from falling asleep. So first point here is that public cloud spend is absolutely massive. If you look at the three hyperscale public cloud providers, this data was taken from their Q1, their most recent Q1 earnings release. AWS is now over $100 billion annual run rate business, which means if you take their Q1 revenue times 4, that's what they would make in a year. Google's at $38 billion. Azure's estimated at 76. I say estimated because Microsoft frustratingly doesn't break out Azure yet. They include it with other small products you may have heard of, like Windows Server and GitHub. In intelligent cloud, but by best estimates at 76 billion. So you put all that together, you're talking about $214 billion a year of spend that's growing almost 20% year over year. So what does that mean? That means you all spend a ton of money with Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, right? And that's not necessarily a problem, right? If there's value being created from that, that's perfectly fine. The problem is that users estimate that roughly a third of all cloud spend, about 28% to be precise, is wasted spend versus efficient spend. Now, what's the difference, right? Efficient spend is the spend that you need to deploy in order to, you know, meet your business or application objectives, whatever they are. Wasted spend is the spend that you could effectively completely remove and still accomplish whatever your application and business objectives are. Right? So your instances are too big, you know, all sorts of, you know, inefficiency that exists in the environment that causes you to pay more than you otherwise would need to pay. And so if we take 28% and we multiply it by 214 billion, you end up with $60 billion annually of waste in the public cloud. So, right, this is the year of generative AI. So I asked ChatGPT 4.0. I said, I'm giving a talk And I need the audience to comprehend the sheer magnitude of $60 billion. And ChatGPT said, if you take dollar bills and you stack them vertically, one on top of another, and you started heading towards the moon, you could get all the way to the moon and back over 12 times. 12 round trips to the moon and back, and that would be $60 billion. So an insane amount of sort of inefficiency and waste. And let's be fair, there's always going to be some amount of waste in the system, right? That's to be expected. The problem is 30% waste is just crazy. And so, you know, to me, this is the problem. This is the challenge. How do we remove this $60 billion of waste from the system? Okay, you've probably seen this chart. This is the FinOps Foundation survey. These are the top priorities for FinOps practitioners. So everyone's got a page one. What's at the top of page one? And it's no surprise that both of these two are related to reducing costs. So my first provocation, and this is the first time this happens, by the way, since the FinOps Foundation is doing the survey, my first provocation is that this is not by chance, right? Cloud spend has gotten so big, the waste pool has gotten so big that the priorities have risen to where reducing this cost is now the top priority for everybody. How do you attack that waste pool? Two ways. One is you either use less stuff, or two, you pay less for the stuff you use. Use less stuff, pay less for the stuff you use. Use less stuff is known as usage or workload optimization. Pay less for what you use is known as rate optimization. So that's the 1 and 2 priorities that you see here. And it's no surprise that this is FactSet's priorities too, right? Hitesh, want to talk about that a bit?
Absolutely. So we've spent the past year just looking at the waste that we have in our system using our visibility tools. There was a lot, right? We had a pretty decent reservation program, so we automated some level of our RIs and savings plans, but we were still leaving money on the table. So that's unutilized dollars that I'm not getting a value on return. And of course, there's always lots and lots of unattached volumes, hanging EIP addresses, right? So all these things that just sit out there, accumulating spend. The cloud providers love that because they're making money and you're giving them money for nothing. So those are top 2 things that we wanted to eliminate from our environment.
Okay, cool. So that's provocation 1. This is not unrelated. The waste pool is the root of the problem that's driving the priorities. Provocation number 2. If you look not at the top 2 priorities, but the greatest year-over-year increase in priority, it was enabling automation. Okay? My second provocation is that you cannot effectively attack and chip away at that waste pool without automation. Automation is required if you're going to make a dent in that $60 billion waste pool. And again, it feels like it moves by itself. Maybe it's AI. What was I saying? It's not by chance that enabling automation is seeing the greatest increase in priority because people are realizing that this is necessary to make a dent to achieve those number 2 objectives, or those number 1 and 2 objectives. We can't just do this with people, we have to do it with automation. If you think about the FinOps Foundation 3 phases, the inform, operate, optimize phases, if you think about how can tooling help enable those processes, we think about it in terms of 2 dimensions, kind of overlaying that. One are visibility or observability tools, and the second is automation tools. And they are both massively important, right? You have to have visibility in your costs. You need to be able to allocate them, understand, increases in spend in different areas, et cetera. But visibility alone is not sufficient to attack the waste pool. And the reason I know that is because visibility tools have been around for many, many years. And the waste pool is not, as a percent, is not actually declining. You have to attack the waste pool with automation. And visibility and automation are like FinOps peanut butter and jelly. They go together. And so having both sets of tools is super valuable in your environment. We talked about this a little bit too, Hitesh. Automation is important in terms of not just one-time solving a problem, but also consistently solving a problem.
Exactly, right? Exactly. So the couple of points I want to make here was one, visibility. Without visibility, you don't know what to automate. The second is automating the right things, right? So you don't want to automate something that's going to shut down something inadvertently. You want to safely automate. So the way I look at this is automate those little things that the engineers don't really have time to work on, or you don't want to reallocate an engineer's time. That's the second point there, which I think we jumped forward. Yeah, there we go. Which we want to get the engineers to take action, but we don't want them to take action on a dollar here, a dollar there. That's where that robo-vacuum comes in, right? Where you want the vacuum to just come around, sweep consistently all the time, picking up those onesies, twosies, right? So that adds up. That's dollars, right? That's dollars in your system. And then also just, the automation of things that can be isolated, right? Things that you can manage, which we'll talk about today in terms of rate optimization, which really engineers, you don't want them to be burdened with thinking about which discount instrument to select to optimize their particular workload. So that's another area that you can easily automate. And again, through visibility, you can then start to automate.
Okay, cool. One more introduction slide. So this, again, is another graph from the FinOps Foundation. Because of the increase in interest in automation, this basically represents the various FinOps domains and sort of the automation maturity, right? So yellow on the right is no automation. Blue is mostly human, some automation. Purple is mostly automation, some human. And green is full automation, or what we call autonomous cost savings. So it's just happening automatically. Sorted by green descending, right? And so what you see is rate optimization is second from the bottom, which means it's one of the least mature capabilities that's been fully automated. And what we want to talk about in this talk specifically is this idea of sort of shifting left, if you will, in terms of enabling automation within your FinOps journey. Shift left is the idea that you're moving things less from sort of people and ops and more into kind of development and code. And so if you think about the crawl, walk, run sort of methodology within the FinOps Foundation, how do you move from kind of crawl level automation and rate optimization to walk and then to run? What does that look like? How do you do that? What results do you see? And so that's sort of what this talk is going to be about. Hitesh, you would say that FactSet's now in the green, correct?
I would agree.
Yep.
I think once we get through this talk, you'll see why I feel like we're in the green, and it's just a good spot to be in.
Yep. So you're in the green. You're in the that 4%, but you weren't always in the green, right? You've had a journey. So let's sort of jump in and talk about your journey.
Yeah,
shifting
definitely.
left.
All right, here we go. So FactSet started their cloud journey back in 2018. So before I joined FactSet, it was already well underway. I would say roughly around 2019 is when they started their internal FinOps program. We're a team of 3 today. Since last year, we've gone a little bit more hybrid. We're mostly AWS, just a bit of a data point there, but well over 3,000 accounts at this point. So we have a micro account strategy. So that's a lot of accounts, a lot of resources in all these accounts, a lot of testing, sandbox work that goes on that easily can get left behind. So in the last couple of years, we've shifted to looking at vendor partners for those things that are non-core, things that I don't want to spend engineering time on because I'd rather have engineering time spent on something that's of greater value and something that can be automated or something that can be just done on a regular basis. I want to be able to see if I can find a vendor partner for that. Again, our focus is increasingly turning all these, moving all our domains into the run phase as much as possible. So what does rate optimization look like in a crawl, walk, run scenario? So in the crawl phase, you're likely very manual. You're probably aware of all the instruments that are there. You're doing the onesies, twosies that you can find and easily do on an ad hoc basis, likely. If we're in that phase at all, right? You might not be doing focused rate optimization. We also might not have any metrics, right? How well are you doing with your rate optimization? When I joined FactSet, I feel like we were actually in the walk phase. We had a lot of automation in place already. We were sweeping all the usage utilization that was going on. We were generating recommendations, but there was still a manual step. We had to evaluate the purchases that the recommendation engine was producing. Again, it was homegrown, but we still had to really understand if those recommendations were actually going to work. And of course, we still didn't have any kind of a value in terms of how well we were doing, a metric of how well we were doing. So we were kind of like in the blended walk crawl phase. So if you're going to build something in the walk phase, right, if you're going to automate some of it yourself, all the steps here are the steps that you kind of need to take, right? You need to read the entire inventory. And again, this is just EC2, right, because that's something that's the most flexible. You have to gather up all the usage, uptime metrics, look at all the RI offerings that are out there, right, because there's new instance types that come along all day. For each instance family, and within the instance family, for each instance, take a look at what's being covered by the RIs that you've already purchased, look at what you need, potentially convert if you have convertible RIs, right? So there's a lot of math going on here. And then figure out what the savings are and see if it's worth buying those RIs or not, right? Because you don't know what the uptimes are going to be. And then lastly, as I mentioned, in our case, do that manual review, right? And we did this on a monthly basis. Again, it's time intensive to look at the recommendations, and if we liked it, which, we really didn't understand it, but we were actually, okay, this looks good, press the button, go ahead and execute, right? And you hope that it did what it was supposed to do. This basically was about 1,800 lines of code, so a lot of code there. We didn't know how well this was doing, so we had to really understand, like, the only thing we could look at was how much was not being covered or how much of the RIs that we've purchased was not being utilized, and that was through our visibility tool. But there is a metric that you can use to judge how well you're doing with your reservations and your discount instruments, and that I will let Erik speak to about ESR.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I noticed when Joe did the intro, a lot of folks, this is their first FinOps X. How many folks know the metric effective savings rate? Would you raise your hand? Okay, cool. There's a bunch. So I actually did a talk last year introducing effective savings rate as a metric. It happens to be the sort of the chief metric that our platform seeks to optimize. But the idea of effective savings rate is that it measures the ROI of your rate optimization efforts. So oftentimes when you're pursuing something like rate optimization, how do you know if you're doing okay, great, or amazing? You need a KPI that you can measure, and no such KPI existed. And so we created the effective savings rate, which is effectively, again, the ROI of your rate optimization efforts. It basically measures, when all is said and done, coverage, utilization, different types of instruments, different discounts, different regions, different all kinds of stuff. Once you smush it all together, at the end of the day, when all is said and done, what have you effectively saved through your rate optimization efforts? You can measure that very simply by the cloud savings that you've generated over what you would have otherwise spent. See, it's very sensitive.
It is.
What you would have otherwise spent if you had no discounts. Simple in concept. Sometimes it's challenging to sort of get at that data, but it's incredibly powerful to have a KPI like this that you can measure and seek to improve. It's exciting because I saw lots of hands raised in here. This is now a reference metric in the FinOps Foundation's rate optimization sort of capability. We've seen other solutions adopt effective savings rate. I just saw a new one actually out on the floor earlier this morning. I've gotten Slacks from people all over the world that aren't customers of ProsperOps and want to implement effective savings rate and ask for my input to make sure they're measuring it correctly, et cetera. So it's been really exciting to see that grow. If you don't know about it or if you want to learn more about it, you can go to effectivesavingsrate.com. Or the FinOps X talk from last year was an introduction, and that's still a line that you can watch. So this is a really key metric and something we're going to talk about as we go on, because it allows us to sort of quantifiably understand the effectiveness and the outcomes of rate optimization efforts.
Thanks. And this was a great metric for us to really communicate upwards as well, so that our management team could really understand how effective our program was. So how did we do with our homegrown tool in the walk phase? We did pretty good, actually. We were pleasantly surprised with the results. We were effectively in the 89th percentile, achieving about 33.7% in terms of effective savings, which I'd say is a
solid
B plus,
B
right?
Plus for
solid
sure.
B plus, right? Not bad.
That means for every dollar spend of on-demand spend, you're paying, 67.3 cents instead, right? So,
So that's a great number to be at, right? But we did have some challenges. So the code that I mentioned was largely unmaintained. The developer had left the company, no idea what to do with the code. You know, again, this is a tricky environment, this tricky situation where you have savings plans, you have convertible RIs, you have standard RIs, you have compute saving plans. What's the right balance of these discount instruments to use, right, to maximize your discounts? And that's really hard to figure out. As mentioned, we were leaving some money on the table, and it was a decent amount of money. So it was one of those head scratchers, like how do you solve that, right? And lastly, most importantly, we were only doing this once a month. We were only checking it once a month. We weren't doing it daily. We weren't doing it frequently enough. So, you know, at this point, we were at a little bit of a crossroads. We wanted to get to the run phase. We had to define what is run for rate optimization. What does run look like, right? So we know what walk looks like. You're semi-automated to us, and I think in general, run is full automation, maximize coverage, maximize savings, lights out operation, right? You don't want to think about it. You don't want to worry about it. It just works. The engineers don't have to think about it, right? So this was our target. This is where we wanted to get to. And again, at the crossroads was really build versus buy, right? I think we're going to hear about it all day today and tomorrow as well. So what's the pattern for build versus buy? Should we spend some engineering time to dust off our code and beef it up, right? Just beef it up and get to the next level. Or the marketplace had matured now in FinOps space. There's plenty of vendors out there now that are doing this. That's their bread and butter. You know, for FactSet, as I mentioned, we're a financial services provider. Doing this kind of work is not our bread and butter, right? So let's spare the engineering time for that kind of financial work for our customers and focus more, you know, with the third-party selection in this particular case. The reason rate optimization works out well is because it is an isolated component. It's an isolated domain, right? It's not going to impact the engineers so much that it's not something going around turning things off. It's not, you know, doing things behind the scenes that an engineer may or may not be aware of. It's completely isolated, and it's really the worst that can happen is you end up paying a little bit more that you can then, you know, your finance guy might not be happy, but at least it's not, you know, impacting customers. So this was the right domain to really start looking at outsourcing and hopefully, you know, gaining that next big bump up that we want to achieve. But the skepticism is there, right? Is it going to work? How are the vendors? We don't know, right? I mean, the vendor can do any better than what our process was already doing? The other thing was around security, right? It's really important to understand that a third party is coming into your environment and managing something for you. So you want to make sure that security is up to snuff, right? That they only have access to just the things that they need to have access to. We have a separate account where all our discount instruments are managed and serviced, purchased. And that's the only account that, you know, the vendor should be able to go into, make these purchases, right? You don't want to have something happen behind the scenes. So those permissions, they publish them, right? Review those permissions with your security team. Make sure that everyone's comfortable with the third party coming into your environment.
Hey, Hitesh, one question.
Go ahead, yeah.
It's interesting because you think about a third-party tool coming in. If it's a visibility tool, you have to grant them access so they can see everything. But I think there's something particularly challenging with an automation tool that's going to come in and actually take actions on your behalf. How do you get comfortable with an automation tool? By the way, that automation tool could be third-party or it could be a tool
internal
that you build yourself. But how do you get comfortable with sort of the Skynet scenario, fear of Skynet, where this automation is going to sort of run amok and sort of wreak havoc in your environment? How do you get comfortable with that?
Right. You have to run a test, run the POCs on your sandbox accounts, right? So the way we approached it with vendor selections, we gave them the opportunity to essentially do what they can, observe and pull in information, but only the sandbox accounts, only the dev accounts, only the test accounts, nothing in production until you're fully comfortable and there isn't anything else behind the scenes. Monitor the cloud trails, monitor the audit trails to make sure that something funky isn't happening behind the scenes, because nobody's perfect. There's always some rule that gets put out there that neither party wants out there. So you have to close those gaps and test before you actually expand out.
Yeah. One other question: how do you think about, maybe think about like self-driving cars, for example? That's a little bit scary, but as cars are trained on more and more miles, right? They see more things. They're able to sort of adapt and learn to more scenarios. So as you think about the importance of that, in particular for an automation tool. How was that factored into kind of your decision?
Right, yeah. And so, our expertise, if we build it internally, would just be our data, right? So it's as good as we are. If you go with a third party or a vendor, they have lots of customers that they're learning from. So they can be a lot better than we can ourselves. And so I think that's the other value that you get is that whichever vendor you're going to select or use, they have the wealth of data, right, that they can then tweak their system to really rate optimize as much as possible.
Yeah. It does feel like there's a tipping point that's happening where, initially there was, when we started ProsperOps 5 years ago, there was tons of skepticism. Like, people will never automate certain things. There'll always need to be a human in the chain. But now we're seeing more and more, we're seeing automation be the #1 increase in priority. We're seeing people adopt fully autonomous, automated solutions across the various domains. So it does feel like there's a tipping point, people getting more comfortable, but there is a process that you have to go to in order to sort of feel comfortable, letting the automation deliver those outcomes for you.
There is a comfort level that you have to get to, and again, you have to feel safe about it. So eventually, we decided to partner with ProsperOps. The first and foremost reason behind this, I still own those discount instruments, right? Easily decouple ProsperOps anytime. Sorry. But we can decouple them anytime. I keep those instruments, right? They don't take it with them. So when you're working with a partner, think about that as well, right? I mean, who owns those discount instruments? It's typically us, and we want to make sure that you can easily decouple. And we did a lot of analysis, right? Because we were up there when we looked at the ESR, and so we did a lot of Excel analysis in terms of going back and forth. What does it look like? Are we going to achieve a greater value if we partner with you guys, right? So, and so eventually we did decide to partner up, and I think the results were pretty impressive. So this was what I think belongs in the run phase. We're at 41.4% and getting better. Just about 100% coverage, right? We're at 96 plus, and we'll talk about what that extra 4% can look like. But it's essentially, we increased our savings by 12%, lifetime savings, right? So I think it was just an easy win for us. Get it out of our environment to manage ourselves, to give to someone else that's an expert in the field to manage it for us. And you can see the value that's gained out of it.
Yeah, so you've gone from 89th percentile B plus to now 95th plus percentile, so solid A range. 12%, meaning the total savings that's been generated that you would have saved, what you actually saved is now 12% higher.
Right.
So that's just money back into FactSet's coffers.
Exactly.
You guys are doing offsets at Cabo, or offsets at Cabo and stuff now, I guess.
Can only wish. No, that extra 12% has helped funded other programs at FactSet. So, and it's also helped finance manage what they need to do there. So it's just freed up. A, we didn't have to use a resource, and B, we gained dollars that we can use for other things that we want to use, and increase the value in the business.
Yeah, and just to kind of put this in perspective, you can directly translate the ESR percentage increase to savings. So, for example, this is completely made up, but if you spend $1 million a month and you increase your ESR by 8%, that's an extra $80,000 a month of savings back into your coffers to reinvest and again, chipping away at that waste pool is what we want to achieve here. So
right, and $80,000 is about $1 million a year, which I think everyone would want that return. I think you're going to go a little bit deeper into the results with full automation. Yeah,
so this is one of the charts in our console for FactSet. We've obviously removed the left Y and X axis labels just for protect the sensitivity of FactSet's data. What you're seeing here is the purple bars represent the global compute usage of FactSet on a monthly basis. And so you can see, if you look at that purple bar, it's going up and down, as you would expect. FactSet's taking advantage of the elasticity of the cloud, scaling up, scaling down on a monthly basis. Their usage is growing, their usage is shrinking. So it's by no means a static environment. The green represents the net savings that they've achieved. And so you can think about chopping off the bottom of the purple bar where the green is, and the remaining purple is what they're actually paying the cloud vendor. That horizontal dotted line and the yellow line are aligned to the right axis. That's their effective savings rate prior to ProsperOps. and then, or in this, let's just talk generally about automating rate optimization and getting to the run phase. So when they were in the walk phase, it was the dotted line. Now that they're in their run phase with ProsperOps, you can see that yellow line A is consistent. We talked about this earlier on, where automation, one of the things it delivers to you is not this idea that, oh my gosh, the cloud bill's spiked, let's go dogpile it with people, solve the problem, and then it eventually sort of comes back. With automation, you're getting this consistency that's happening month after month that is ensuring that what needs to happen is happening. And so their ESR is not only consistent, but you can see that it's actually growing up and to the right and will continue to grow as our particular strategies play out in their environment. So again, coming back to ESR as a metric, it's a great metric to use as you're tracking your progress and sort of shifting left. You can look at your ESR prior in your walk phase, your ESR as you mature, and the diff between those is effectively your incremental savings. So it's a way to measure and kind of justify your efforts in these areas.
Yep.
Okay, let's look at one more slide that is kind of an example of like one sophisticated feature when you actually automate things that you can't really do if you're not in the run phase. So what we're looking at now is not a monthly chart, but an hourly view of FactSet's usage. And so we've moved from monthly to hourly. And in fact, if you look at the, you can see there's some dark colors, and on the right side there's a little bit of light colors. The dark colors represent the CUR in this case, which is a lagging set of usage, cost and usage data. Beyond that is actually our platform interrogating their environment and understanding a real-time view of what's happening. So we are making decisions on an hourly basis, and not only are we making them on an hourly basis, we are making them on the last hour of usage. And so when you automate, you can do sophisticated things like really responding on an immediate basis. The totality of the green and the gray is basically their commitment portfolio. We deploy a variety of commitments to maximize their savings, and that represents that. The mix is unimportant, but what I want you to notice is the red. The red is their remaining on demand, and somebody in our team, we see this pattern all the time, calls it the mountains and Martian lakes slide, which I think is very memorable. But you end up with those 5 peaks, which I'm sure you can guess is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then you end up with the weekend plateaus. And in those plateaus, that yellow there represents unutilized compute savings plans. And so what most people try to avoid unutilization, but to actually optimize and maximize for ESR, you want to increase your coverage above the trough and find that optimal point of coverage that maximizes savings. You have to take into account a lot of factors, right? What is the magnitude of the spikes, the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday spikes? In this case, you're turning things off in evenings as well. So that shape is different for every customer. The discounts that you receive are different, but you can do math to figure out where that optimal point is. And that horizontal dark gray line represents, in this case, for FactSet's unique scenario for this usage pattern, the optimal point of coverage. And you can see that the totality of their portfolio, the green and the gray, are basically right at that optimal coverage line. And so as their usage is changing monthly, our system is continually trying to manipulate and rate optimize in order to generate the maximum effective savings rate, given their specific usage pattern. So this is just one example of the types of sophistication that can exist as you move into the run phase and as you seek to fully automate.
Right, I don't think this is something that we would have been able to do internally at all to get to an hourly evaluation and doing all that math to get out there, right? That's sophisticated engineering resources that we would not have put towards this particular example. We would have lived with the 33%. So what does this all mean, right? So one thing that we talked about and how this all kind of comes together, what we like to call, what we're dubbing the FinOps automation flywheel, right? And so it's the concept of using automation to get savings going and get that continuous savings going, and you start getting time back, right? So that what happens is you automate something, you don't need to worry about it anymore. You're just continuously saving that, you're freeing up your own resources to go look at something else, right? So in our case, rate optimization was a great start to get that inertia removed, right? To get that flywheel spinning, so that now we can go pursue other opportunities. What we did with that was we built that little, vacuum to pick up all those crumbs, right? So every day, every so often, the process wakes up and picks up all those unattached volumes. We're getting those dollars and those savings. The engineers don't need to worry about that. And so now we can focus more on working with those engineers and collaborating with them on right-sizing, on potentially thinking about cost as we're building new workloads. And then lastly, it's really about just keeping it going, right? It's other things that we did was we ran Optimization Week. So my team freed up some time, spent the week with engineers to show them other opportunities beyond just the basics. And that actually had more dollars that were saved. So you can see how this flywheel starts going.
Make it spin. I think it spins in the deck.
Oh, look at that, it worked.
We got 10 minutes left. Let me tell a quick story. I'm going to date myself. I'm a child of the 80s. Who knows who Andy Rooney is? You guys know who Andy Rooney is? Some people? Andy Rooney was kind of like I grew up watching him on 60 Minutes when I was a kid. He's kind of like this curmudgeon who would rant on random things, almost like Seinfeld before Seinfeld. And if you don't know who Seinfeld is, then I'm really dating myself. But I remember as a kid, this report came out that there are too many doctors in the United States. We're pumping out too many doctors. And he just went off in a rant and said, this is ridiculous. He said, the way I'll know there's too many doctors is when I call my doctor's office and my doctor himself answers the phone and says, hey, Andy, how's it going? I got nothing to do. I'm just sitting here doing a crossword puzzle. He's like, when that happens, then we've got too many doctors in the United States. And sometimes when I think about FinOps, I think about that Andy Rooney rant, because I've never met a FinOps person that whenever I ask them how it's going, they're like, Erik, everything's humming along, everything's checked. Everything's fine, I got nothing to do. There's always 5 pages of issues, and you have the bandwidth to do 1 page. So you have all these things that you can't actually get to. And the cool thing, and the idea with the FinOps flywheel, and this is super powerful, is that if you can automate certain things, right, that not only puts money back in your budget, we talked about that, but as important, it puts time back into your budget. It frees up things like, do you even think about rate optimization now?
Lights out, I don't think about it at all.
I mean, I'm sure you check in and audit and make sure things are fine, but it's freed up time. And now what you can do is you can take things that are on the page 2 list and move them to page 1. And now you can start working on more things. And you can then, if you can automate more, you can take the time and money from that and move something else from your page 2 list to your page 1 list. And you get that flywheel spinning. The flywheel concept comes from Good to Great, if you ever read that book. Right, where you have this huge wheel and you're trying to get it just spinning. It's hard to get it moving, but once you get it spinning, it moves faster and faster and faster and faster. And so if you can get this FinOps automation flywheel spinning, you get time back, you get money back, savings back, and this just unlocks your ability to sort of do more and more and more. And the title of the talk is Doing More with Less, and this is kind of the idea. And rate optimization is just a great way to get that flywheel spinning. If you haven't got that flywheel spinning yet, rate optimization is a great way to get it going, get some savings, get some time back, and then just start to try to get that flywheel spinning.
Right, and ultimately it shows value to your leadership as well, because they see the bottom line. And so once that flywheel starts going, rate optimization starts to see those savings and those dollars back in the budget, they want you to do more and more and more. So it's a great win-win for everything.
Cool, FinOps automation flywheel. I think I got one more slide. Yes, okay. So this is kind of like Steve Jobs' one more thing, although it's going to be cool, but not that cool as something Steve Jobs might do. But we've talked about effective savings rates as a very important metric. It's adoption by the FinOps Foundation and other tooling providers. That said, there has been some sort of critique of effective savings rate, and we've been hearing that and sort of processing it through the FinOps Foundation. And some of the critique has been that effective savings rate is great at measuring the effectiveness in terms of savings of your rate optimization efforts. But there's another dimension to rate optimization, which has to do with risk. And just looking at effective savings rate is kind of a one-sided view. You're only looking at one side of the coin. But there's these other dimensions of risk that aren't being quantified today. And so we've been thinking about that and thinking about how do we help quantify the sort of broad spectrum of rate optimization. And I'm going to tell one more story. I was sent a talk that I listened to where someone was asking Warren Buffett, who's one of the greatest investors of our generation, about the essence of investing. And Warren told a story about Aesop, right? You probably know Aesop's fables, like The Boy Who Cried Wolf or Tortoise and the Hare. Well, Aesop also coined the phrase, which you've probably heard, that a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. And Warren Buffett said Aesop did a really good job for like 600 BC, but actually Aesop wasn't quite complete in that saying. Because he said it's not so much that a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, but the question is, how long is it going to take to get the two birds out of the bush? And what are the chances that I might not get the two birds out of the bush? So he basically said investing, in essence, boils down to three things. You can keep your one bird in the hand, or if I take a risk, how many birds can I get out of the bush? How long is it going to take me to get them out? And what's the risk of doing that? And when I heard that talk, I realized this is really, this is very, very much parallels rate optimization in cloud. Because ESR is really about the return, the ROI. How many birds can you get out of the bush, right? You can run on demand and you cannot make commitments. But if you're going to make a commitment, how much return can you get? That's what ESR delivers. The two other things that aren't represented are the duration, how long does it take, and the risk of doing so, because we come across customers that actually have negative effective savings rates. You can make commitments in a way that actually causes you to spend more than you would have otherwise spent if you did nothing. And so we're excited here today to announce for the first time a new metric we're going to be introducing called Commitment Lock-in Risk, or CLR. And that is basically a trailing weighted average duration of all of your commitments. And just like ESR, it's a single number that you can measure to help you understand your lock-in risk. If you're a ProsperOps customer, it's actually going to flow into our console here in the next couple of weeks, so you'll see that. We're going to be submitting it to the FinOps Foundation and getting feedback from the community and working to sort of hopefully have that be adopted like ESR. There is another metric we're working on that isn't quite ready around this idea of risk of potentially losing money through commitments. That is going to be coming soon as well. We'll also release that through the FinOps Foundation to our customers as well. But we think the companion metrics of commitment lock-in risk and another risk of potential loss along with ESR really provides a comprehensive view of your rate optimization efforts. And so we're excited to get feedback on that and hopefully be talking about it at next FinOps X. So that's all we got. Oh, actually one more thing. You're all invited, if you're not coming, to the Friday night 8-bit after party, which is out here at the pool. We'd love to see you there. You can RSVP via this QR code if you haven't already. And if you want to learn more about ProsperOps, this is our booth. We're out there. Hitesh and I are going to be, we'll take questions now. I think we have 2-3 minutes. And then we'll also just be outside the room if you have questions after.
So you kind of touched on this in the last bit with the complementary metrics. And my question was going to be around how you apply this into the automation. So in our organization, we are reasonably mature on the rate optimization. So we've got, albeit manual, pretty good savings plans coverage. There's a lot of intelligence around it, approval pass, understanding. Whereas on the consumptive side, so workload side, particularly poor. So things not right-sized, not switched off, likely to change instance, family, that sort of thing. So how do you, if you go down the automation path on the rate side, ensure that you're not creating a flaw when you then get better at a financial flaw when you get better at the consumptive side?
Yep, so right now, these are focused on rate optimization efforts. We actually have some ideas about how we can, usage and rate are kind of like the 1-2 punch of attacking the waste pool. So these are primarily focused on rate today, but we have ideas about how to extend them into usage as well. I would love, as we present these to the community, we would love community involvement in helping to talk about how to best do that. one of the things that's sort of more simple in rate optimization is it's easier to baseline. So it's easier to sort of compare, and that gets harder in rate optimization because if you turn something off, how long do you take credit for those savings? And so we have some ideas about how to do this, but again, this is a community. We'd love sort of involvement on how to best do that. That's a great question.
Well, with that, we are out of time, but you can continue asking questions to Hitesh and Erik outside in the lounge or at the booth, at the ProsperOps booth in the Expo Hall. Let's give them a big round of applause.
Thanks for watching. Check out more FinOps X 2024 content on our YouTube channel on the 2024 playlist. Support our channel by liking, subscribing, clicking the notification bell, and by leaving comments and questions for our speakers. We appreciate your support.